when a racist teacher suspended a black girl over nothing but the color of her skin, they thought no one would stand up to them. But this girl refused to be silenced. What she did next shattered expectations, exposed the truth, and left not just the teacher, but the entire school in complete disbelief. This is a story you won't forget. The sun rose quietly over the small town, its golden light spilling into the modest streets and filling classrooms with the hum of a new school day. In one corner of the town, 14-year-old Aaliyah walked briskly to school, her backpack bouncing lightly against her shoulders. She had always loved learning, despite the challenges she faced. Her curly hair framed her face, and her eyes sparkled with ambition, a spark that no one could dim. But that day was different. As Aaliyah stepped into her classroom, the usual buzz of chatter seemed subdued. Her classmates glanced at her, some with pity, others with nervous smiles. At the center of it all stood Miss Sanderson, a teacher known for her strict demeanor and veiled prejudices. Miss Sanderson often masked her disdain with sharp comments and impossible expectations, particularly aimed at Aaliyah. Aaliyah slid into her seat, feeling the weight of an invisible spotlight. She had faced subtle jabs before, but today, something felt heavier. The lesson began, and Miss Sanderson's voice cut through the room like a cold wind. "Class, before we start, let's address a matter of discipline," Miss Sanderson began, her sharp eyes landing on Aaliyah. "It seems some students need a reminder about how to behave appropriately." Aaliyah froze. She knew this was about her, though she had done nothing wrong. Miss Sanderson pulled out a form, her lips curling into a tight smile. "Aaliyah, you've been suspended. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the classroom. Aaliyah blinked, her hands trembling as she tried to process what was happening. "For what?" she asked softly, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. "For disrupting the classroom environment," Miss Sanderson replied, her tone dripping with condescension. "And frankly, your attitude hasn't aligned with our school's values." It was a flimsy excuse. Everyone in the room could feel the unspoken truth. This wasn't about behavior. It was about who Aaliyah was. Aaliyah stood, her legs shaky as she gathered her things. The silence in the room was suffocating. Her peers watched her leave, but no one dared to speak up. She walked down the hallway, her head held high despite the tears welling in her eyes. Inside, her heart was breaking. She reached the school doors and stepped outside, the cold air biting against her skin. The humiliation was unbearable. But more than that, she felt a deep, gnawing anger. How could someone entrusted to educate and inspire treat her this way? Aaliyah sat on the curb, clutching her backpack tightly. Her tears finally spilled over, hot and heavy. She thought of her mother, who had always told her to stand tall, no matter what. She thought of the stories of resilience her grandmother shared about their family's struggles. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. This wasn't just about her. It was about every girl like her who had been silenced, dismissed, or told they didn't belong. Aaliyah wiped her tears and stood up. This wasn't the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Aaliyah walked home that day, each step fueled by a mix of humiliation, rage, and determination. Her mother, Monica, was waiting at the door. She could tell something was wrong the moment she saw her daughter's tear-streaked face. "What happened, baby?" Monica asked, pulling Aaliyah into her arms. Aaliyah's voice trembled as she recounted every word Miss Sanderson had said, the blatant injustice of it cutting through her like a knife. Monica's expression darkened as she listened. "They suspended you for your skin color," Monica said softly, her voice trembling with both fury and sadness. "I've seen this kind of thing before, but I never thought they'd go this far." Aaliyah wiped her face, her resolve hardening. "Mum, I'm not going to let her get away with this. She needs to be held accountable." Monica nodded. "You're absolutely right, and you don't have to do this alone." That evening, Monica posted Aaliyah's story on social media. The post was raw and honest, describing how her daughter had been suspended for no reason other than being unapologetically herself. Within hours, the post began to spread like wildfire. Comments flooded in. "This is outrageous. How is this happening in 2025? Aaliyah is so brave. Tell her to keep her head up. Let's make sure this teacher faces the consequences." By the next morning, local activists had reached out, offering their support. They organized a meeting at a nearby community center, and dozens of families showed up. Many shared their own experiences of bias and mistreatment in the same school system. "We're tired of this," said one father, his voice filled with emotion. "Our kids deserve better." Monica stood before the crowd, holding Aaliyah's hand. "This isn't just about my daughter. It's about every child who has been made to feel less than. We're not asking for special treatment, just fairness." The crowd erupted in applause, their determination palpable. And the days that followed, Aaliyah worked tirelessly. With the help of her community, she drafted a formal letter to the school board, outlining Ms. Sanderson's actions and demanding accountability. She cited policies about equity and inclusion, exposing how the teacher had violated them. But Aaliyah didn't stop there. She also created a video, sharing her story in her own words. The video was heartfelt, raw, and powerful. "I'm not just speaking for myself," she said in the video, her voice steady. "I'm speaking for every black student who has ever felt unwelcome in a classroom. We deserve better." The video quickly went viral, gaining thousands of views in just a few days. Celebrities and activists began sharing it, amplifying her message. When the day of the school board meeting arrived, the room was packed. Parents, students, and community members filled every seat, with dozens more standing along the walls. Cameras from local news stations captured the scene. Miss Sanderson sat at the front, her face pale and drawn. She glanced nervously at the crowd, clearly unprepared for the backlash. Aaliyah took the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. But when she spoke, her voice was clear and unwavering. "I'm here today because I believe in the power of education," she began. "But how can we learn when the people who are supposed to teach us are the ones holding us back?" The room was silent as she recounted her story. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down many faces. The school board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly aware of the gravity of the situation. The school board meeting room buzzed with tension. After Aaliyah's powerful speech, the crowd erupted into applause, their cheers echoing through the room. But at the front of the room, the school board members sat in heavy silence, their expressions a mixture of guilt and discomfort. Ms. Sanderson shifted uncomfortably in her seat. The once confident teacher now seemed small under the weight of the room's collective judgment. The board president, Mr. Thompson, cleared his throat and leaned into the microphone. "Thank you, Aaliyah, for your courage in bringing this matter to our attention," he began, his voice carefully measured. "We take these allegations very seriously, and an internal review has already been launched." But the crowd wasn't satisfied with vague promises. A parent in the audience stood up. "What kind of review? This isn't just about one teacher. It's about a culture that allows this to happen." Another voice shouted, "We need action, not excuses." The pressure in the room was mounting. Mr. Thompson hesitated, glancing at his fellow board members. Finally he said, "We will address this matter thoroughly, but due to confidentiality policies, we cannot discuss personnel actions in this forum." The crowd murmured in frustration, but Aaliyah stepped forward again, her voice cutting through the noise. "With all due respect," she said, her tone steady but firm, "policies shouldn't protect people who harm students. If this school truly values inclusion and fairness, it's time to prove it." As Aaliyah finished speaking, the doors at the back of the room opened. A man in a sharp navy suit walked in, carrying a briefcase. Whispers rippled through the crowd as they recognized him. Mr. Johnson, a prominent civil rights lawyer and close family friend of Monica's. "Sorry for the interruption," Mr. Johnson said, striding confidently to the front of the room. "I represent Aaliyah and her family. We've come prepared with evidence, including testimonies from other students and parents. documenting a troubling pattern of discrimination by Ms. Sanderson. He opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick stack of papers. This isn't just about one incident. It's about systemic racism in this school. And if action isn't taken immediately, we're prepared to take this matter to court. The room erupted. Cameras flashed as reporters scrambled to document the moment. Ms. Sanderson's face turned ghostly pale, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. Parents and students began standing up, one after another, sharing their stories of bias and mistreatment at the school. A father recounted how his son had been unfairly punished for defending himself against racist bullying. A mother spoke about her daughter being overlooked for leadership roles despite her qualifications. Each story added weight to the case against Ms. Sanderson and the broader culture of the school. The board members were visibly shaken, realizing this wasn't an isolated incident. It was a reckoning. Aaliyah watched as her community stood beside her, their voices amplifying her own. Her heart swelled with a mix of pride and relief. What had started as her personal battle had grown into something much bigger, a collective movement for justice. After hours of discussion and public outcry, Mr. Thompson finally spoke again. His voice was heavy, and his words carried the weight of what had transpired. "We have reviewed the evidence presented today," he said. "Effective immediately, Ms. Sanderson is placed on administrative leave, pending further investigation. Additionally, we will be conducting an external review of our policies and practices to ensure this school is a safe and inclusive environment for all students." The room broke into applause and cheers. Aaliyah's mother hugged her tightly, tears streaming down her face. But Aaliyah wasn't done yet. She stepped up to the microphone one last time. "This isn't just about me," she said, her voice steady. "It's about making sure no other student has to go through what I did. Thank you to everyone who stood with me. This is our victory, not just mine." The morning after the school board meeting, Aaliyah woke up to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window. Her phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand, lighting up with messages and notifications. She reached for it, her heart racing as she saw the headlines. "Black student stands up to racist teacher, inspires a movement." "Community unites against discrimination in local school." "Courageous teen sparks change in education system." Her video had gone viral again, this time with clips from the school board meeting. Thousands of people were sharing messages of support and admiration. Comments flooded her social media. "You're so brave, Aaliyah. Keep shining." "Thank you for speaking up. You've given hope to so many." This is the kind of leadership we need in our schools. Aaliyah felt a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and a lingering disbelief at how far her story had traveled. When Aaliyah returned to school the following week, everything felt different. The hallways, once filled with whispered taunts and judgmental stares, were now brimming with respect and admiration. Classmates she barely knew stopped her to say, "You're amazing," or "Thank you for standing up for all of us." Her teachers were noticeably more cautious in their words and actions, especially those who had remained silent in the past. The administration had started rolling out diversity training programs and forums for students to voice their concerns. But the most noticeable change was in Aaliyah herself. She no longer felt like a lone voice in a sea of silence. She had found her power and realized the strength that came from standing up, not just for herself, but for others too. Outside the school, the impact of Aaliyah's stand was spreading far and wide. Local businesses began funding scholarships for underprivileged students. Community leaders organized workshops to address systemic racism in education. Even neighboring school districts reached out to learn from Aaliyah's experience, hoping to prevent similar incidents in their schools. At a town hall meeting, Aaliyah was invited to speak. As she stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd of familiar faces, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. "Change doesn't happen overnight," she said, her voice confident. "But it starts with moments like these, moments where we say, 'Enough is enough.'" I'm proud of what we've accomplished together, and I know this is just the beginning." Her words sparked a standing ovation, the kind of applause that comes from knowing you're witnessing something transformative. Aaliyah's story didn't just resonate locally, it went global. She was invited to participate in an online panel about racism in education, alongside activists and educators from around the world. Her perspective as a young black student who had lived through discrimination brought raw authenticity to the discussion. During the panel, she shared, "It's not easy to speak up, especially when you're young and feel powerless. But what I've learned is that our voices have power, and when we use them, we can create ripples that turn into waves." Her words inspired thousands more to share their own stories, creating a global conversation about equity and inclusion in schools. Despite the attention, Aaliyah remained grounded. She continued to excel in her studies and became a mentor to younger students who looked up to her as a role model. Her relationship with her mother deepened as well. Monica often reminded her, "I've always been proud of you, but now the world gets to see what I've known all along. You're a leader." Aaliyah would smile and reply, "I couldn't have done it without you, Mom." Months had passed since the school board meeting, but Aaliyah's name was still on everyone's lips. What started as a single act of courage had become a movement that was changing lives, not just in her town, but far beyond. One crisp autumn morning, Aaliyah was called into the principal's office. Her heart fluttered with a mix of nerves and curiosity. Principal Carter greeted her with a warm smile and gestured for her to sit. "Aaliyah, I wanted to let you know that the school board has finalized their decision," Principal Carter began. "Ms. Sanderson has been officially dismissed from her position, and the district is implementing new equity-focused policies." Aaliyah's chest tightened with emotion. It wasn't just about the dismissal. It was about the acknowledgement that things needed to change. "There's more," Principal Carter continued. "The board has decided to rename the annual Leadership Award after you. From now on, it will be called the Aaliyah Davis Resilience Award. Your bravery will inspire generations of students." Tears welled in Aaliyah's eyes. She had never imagined that standing up for herself could lead to something so profound. The day of the award ceremony arrived, and Aaliyah stood on the stage in the school auditorium. Students, teachers, parents, and community members filled the seats, their faces glowing with pride and admiration. Aaliyah took a deep breath before speaking into the microphone. "I want to thank everyone who stood with me during one of the hardest times of my life," she began. "This award isn't just for me. It's for every student who's ever felt unheard, unseen, or undervalued. You have a voice, use it, and know that change is always possible." The room erupted in applause. Aaliyah smiled, her heart full as she handed the first ever Resilience Award to a younger student, a shy boy who had written an essay about overcoming bullying. Though Aaliyah had become a public figure, she never let the spotlight overshadow her personal growth. She began tutoring younger students, especially those struggling with confidence, sharing her story to inspire them to believe in themselves. One day, while helping a girl struggling with public speaking, Aaliyah said, "I used to be scared to speak up too. But sometimes bravery is just doing what's right, even when your voice shakes." The girl beamed, her nervousness replaced with determination. By the end of the school year, Aaliyah was invited to deliver a graduation speech. As she stood on the stage, the memories of her journey flooded her mind. The tears, the anger, the triumph. "Standing here today, I realize something important," Aaliyah said. "Sometimes the biggest challenges aren't meant to break us. They're meant to make us stronger. What I went through wasn't easy, but it taught me to never underestimate the power of standing up for what's right." Her voice softened as she looked at the sea of faces before her. "Each of you has that same power. When you see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. Your voice can change the world." The audience leapt to their feet, giving her a standing ovation. As Aaliyah walked off the stage, she felt a sense of peace. Her story had come full circle, from a moment of humiliation to a legacy of empowerment. That summer, she was invited to speak at national conferences and even received a scholarship from a prominent civil rights organization. But no matter how far her story reached, Aaliyah never forgot the roots of her courage, her family, her community, and her unwavering belief in justice. She often reflected on that day in Ms. Sanderson's classroom and thought, "She tried to silence me, but instead, she gave me the loudest voice of all.